Okay, hey everybody. So continuation of yesterday's video on blurring motion. Hope you're having a lot of fun with that. Let's look at a little bit of stop motion. So here's my setup, just over there behind the camera. I'll show you in a second. But just a box fan with some crepe paper and some other lightweight pieces of paper just kind of stuck to it. And I put, as much light as I have around here on it so that I'll eventually be able to get a fast shutter speed. So I'm going to start off at 1/8 of a second at f32. So let me go over and turn the fan on, and you'll be able to see what that looks like kind of in real speed here, or real time, so to speak. So there I have the fan on, and you can see everything blowing around. Okay? So let's get back to the camera and let's see what we can come up with, okay? So at 1/8 of a second, as you can imagine, even at f32, right? Lots of depth of field at 32, but at 1/8 of a second, right? Look how much blurring motion we have, right? So nothing is sharp. Everything is moving. I actually kind of like the white. It looks pretty cool. This one you can't even see it's moving so much, right? It's never in place long enough to get recorded. Okay? So let's just start bumping the shutter speed. Obviously we have to do equivalent exposure, right? So if I'm going to go less light on the shutter speed, 1/8, 15th, I'm going to have to go more light on the aperture, 32. I'm going to have to go to 22. Take that picture. Yeah, maybe a tiny bit better, but still really blurry. Okay? So let's go to 1/30th of a second, and then we'll have to go to f16. Take that picture. Maybe a little bit better. It's not quite as blurry. You can actually see this one now a little bit, right? Okay, well let's keep bumping the shutter speed. So I'm going to go 30, I'm going to go to a 60th of a second, and I'm going to need to go to f11. So remember, I'm going less light on the shutter, so I need to go more light. Start at f32, 16, 20, or 32, 22, 16, now 11. Okay, and we'll take that picture. Okay, it's getting better. Things are getting a little sharp in places, so we can actually see some of the crinkles in the crepe paper there. Okay, well let's keep going. So now we're going to go to 1/25th of a second at f8. Now you notice as I'm changing these, I have this camera set up on 2 clicks equals a stop. Most of your cameras are set up as 3 clicks equal a stop, so your cameras are set up in 1/3 of a stop. That takes too long. For me, I like having the camera set up in half stops. And you can go into your menu functions and find that. So Google that where that is. In the Canon stuff, it's in like a custom function menu. In Nikon's, I think it's in a shooting menu that you can adjust how much the click makes the aperture or shutter or ISO move, okay? All right, so 125 at f8. Let's take that picture. And we're getting a whole lot sharper here. We'll run through these in a second so you can see them all in order. Okay? Whole lot sharper. So 250 at 5.6. Looking pretty good there. We've got a lot of good sharpness here, right? Things are freezing pretty good. Now out at the end where it's really fluttering, a lot more speed, right? But back in here where the amplitude isn't as much, you can see that stuff getting frozen. But out at the end where it's really whipping, you can see it's still blurry. So that's the fun part, right? Picking what you want. So 250, let's get up to 500th of a second, f4. And my phone's ringing. And we can see now we're getting lots of good sharpness in our frame here, in our image, right? We've still got a little bit of whipping going on there and a little bit of blurriness. But let's try to get all the way to 1,000th of a second. Fortunately for me, this lens opens up all the way to f2.8. So the benefit of having a big aperture, right? We can get that extra shutter speed. In our situation here, let's take that picture, 1,000th of a second. Pretty good. We're actually starting to even freeze the blades of the fan. Notice that. Look how good and sharp that is. Look at that, right out to the end. You're getting none of that fluttering, right, even at the very end, because 1,000th of a second, okay? Now, I can go to 2,000th of a second, but if we do that, what's going to happen? It's going to be very much underexposed, so let's take that picture and see. It'll be a stop under, and it's not awful, but it is dark, okay? So we can't open the aperture up anymore because we're at f2.8, and that's as big as this aperture will go. So we have a variable left, right? We can bump our ISO, and we can go to 3,200. So let's do that. Get my ISO button here. If I can read it, it's so tiny. I go to 3,200. That gets me one more stop, more light. So let's try that a 2,000th of a second at f2.8. And we just about have the fan blades frozen, right? There's very little blurring on that. And what you're seeing is a little bit of the edge of the fan blade is actually a little bit noisy from the high ISO, okay? But we can go to a 4,000th of a second, but again, if we do that, it'll be underexposed, so we have to go back to our ISO, and we're going to go all the way to 6,400 and take that picture. 4,000th of a second at f2.8 at ISO 6,400. And that should be pretty good. Yep, that looks pretty darn good. Everything is frozen solid right out to the very end. There's no whipping, there's no moving, and you are seeing this noise creep in from such a high ISO. But we've essentially stopped the fan blades, and we've done a pretty good job here. So if we punch that up, and now we simply go back through them, watch the fan, right? You can see my shutter speed down here as we go to 1,000, right? You can see the fan blades spinning more, and the crepe paper, 500, 250, you know? It's like, which one do you like best? You know, I kind of like right in there, I kind of like be able to see the fan with a little bit of blur to it. And we got good blurring on the end of the crepe paper. Maybe 250 is the right shutter speed for this. Maybe 125 looks pretty cool. I don't know, you know, it's up to you what you want to do. But it's an exercise in using equivalent exposure and getting the right shutter speed you want to get the exact amount of blur that you want, or that, you know, call it the other way, the exact amount of freeze that you want. So it's really kind of fun to play with. Again, here's an example, you know, of shutter speed being a lot of fun to play with. Let me shut the fan off here. There, that's better. Of shutter speed, you know, being a lot of fun to play with. Because it really gives us an opportunity to, you know, again, pick that slice of time you want to record. So you can see my setup here. I had these two lights on that I brought from school. I had some overhead lights on. I had another light on over here that you can see right over there. And then I had this little work light on, which I've used before as well, to give me just a little bit more punch, to get as much light as possible so I could have that high shutter speed if I wanted to. And still use the high ISO too. So I kind of did the whole range of operations here as to what you can do with deciding how much shutter speed you want to use, how much blur do you want to have in a situation like that. So, you know, ceiling fans work, but take like some painter's tape and put a stripe on like maybe two of the blades. like that blue painter's tape. I had some laying around here somewhere. I don't know what I did with it. Do something like that so you can see the blur and you can get that. You know, this situation worked well, and you could certainly do something like this with you know, the crepe paper on a box fan, and you know, that kind of a situation that we set up here was pretty simple to do. So a lot of things you can try and do to make this happen and have some fun with it, okay? All right, I do have one more thing to show you, so I'm going to go back to the screen here, and we'll zoom in a little bit, right about there. And I'll turn the light on myself so you guys can see me a little bit better here now. There we go. So the next setup or the next exercise that I want you to try and do is called a pan shot, okay? Get my camera off the tripod here. Is a pan shot, okay? So in a pan shot, let's go into some menu functions and see what we're going to be doing, okay? The pan shot is where we're going to be following something. Like if you go out to a kind of a busy road, obviously stay off the road and a safe distance away, and you want to follow a car or follow somebody on a bicycle. You're panning with them. And you want to be very deliberate with your pan so you can follow them. But let's get some camera functions up here that we want to try and use for something like this, okay? All right. We're really going to be down on shutter speed, like 125, 60, okay? Something like that. You're going to be outdoors. So maybe around f8, f11, and you're probably going to be, you know, ISO 400, 800, 200, something like, depending on how bright the day is, okay? Now let's look at your drive function. You want to be on continuous, okay? This one has low speed and high speed continuous. So you want to be on continuous shooting so that when you hold the button down, it just keeps firing and keeps taking pictures, okay? All right, so you want to be on continuous, okay? ISO is pretty good. Here's the big one, the autofocus. Wait, let me turn my autofocus back on. The autofocus is, here's where you want to be. There's that servo that we talked about earlier when we talked about the various function of autofocus. This servo, or if you have a Nikon, I think it's called tracking. This allows you to track an object. So you start taking a picture of a car down the street, and as you follow the car, it's obviously getting closer to you. So the autofocus system will track that and adjust automatically in real time, amazing stuff, and keep the car in focus. So what I want you to think about doing is, say the street's right out in front of you, okay? You're parallel with the street. I want you to try and pick the car up over here at about a 45-degree angle or so. And you hold that button halfway down and get a focus lock on the car. And then as the car gets closer, you wait until it gets, you know, about 10 or 11 o'clock on the clock, if noon is straight out, like 10 or 11, and then you start taking pictures, okay? Now I can't hear if I can get a focus lock, it'll let me do this. I have to turn the autofocus off so it'll let me take a picture here. So then you pick the car up, and when you get to about 10 or 11 o'clock, you're just going to follow it and hold the button down. Got it? You're going to follow through and be smooth with it. You may try left to right or right to left. Okay? But that's the whole idea of a pan shot, is to let the camera do the work. Right? So you want to be on continuous shooting. If you have a high-speed continuous shooting, by all means do that. And you want that autofocus to be on a servo or tracking function. And the shutter speed's going to be fairly slow, 60, 125, something like that. You may even try a 30th if you can get your f-stop up high enough to, say, 22, depending again how bright it is outside. And that's a pan shot, and those are a lot of fun to do at, you know, track meets or somebody running, or I could say a car going down the road. because you give the illusion the car is going 100 miles an hour and it may only be going 25. So that's why you have to have the shutter speed fairly slow, because you're going to end up blurring the background. The car will be sharp because the camera and the car are going the same speed as you're following it. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. So the background gets blurred because the background is stationary. Now you're moving the camera. Remember what happened when we moved the camera with the shutter open? We blurred. But now if you have a sharp subject, and you're following it and you're taking pictures as you're moving, the background will be blurry, the subject will be sharp, and it's a very cool way to take a picture. Okay, great. I'll post this up, and you guys can get started on that assignment or that exercise of doing some motion freeze, playing around, getting used to it, so that when it comes time to do the assignment is, in the assignment area will be motion freeze, motion blur will be your assignment. It's in the, it's in the module. Okay? All right, cool. See you next time. Bye.